How far does unconditional love go? When your family makes you feel disposable. I was standing at the cruise port, luggage at my feet, sunscreen on my face, sunglasses in place, ready to board the vacation of my dreams with my son, his wife, and my grandchildren. At least that's what I believed, until my phone buzzed with a text message that would change everything. In that instant, my heart froze. I can still smell the salt in the air from that morning. The port of Savannah, Georgia, was crowded with animated tourists, loading luggage and smiles. I was smiling too, eager for this family cruise we'd planned for months. At 62 years old, this was supposed to be my first ship voyage. A small dream fulfilled after decades of hard work. My sunscreen in my straw bag, my new beach hat, 3 dresses purchased specifically for formal dinners. The quiet joy of a simple woman about to realize a modest dream. My son Darius was running late. Nothing unusual. Since marrying Tamika, punctuality had become a luxury item. I sat on a bench near the boarding area and waited, watching families arrive happily, hugging, united, as I thought ours would be. Then my phone vibrated. A message from Darius. Mamá, ha habido un cambio de planes. No vendrás con nosotros en el crucero. Tamika prefiere que sea solo la familia. I read those words 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. My eyes didn't believe them, but my heart already knew. I looked up and there they were on the upper deck. Darius, Tameka, and my 2 grandchildren, Malik Jr. and Zaria. They didn't notice me watching. Or perhaps they did and pretended they didn't. Tameka was smiling, adjusting her hair while pointing something out to the children. My son was checking his phone, probably verifying that I'd read his message. Only family? As if I were, what? A distant satellite? A stranger? No. I was the woman who raised him alone, who worked 2 jobs so he could attend good schools, who held him when he cried after losing soccer games. My hands trembled. I collected my luggage and left that port without looking back. The taxi dropped me home 40 minutes later. I entered the apartment that once felt welcoming and now smelled of abandonment. I threw my purse on the sofa and went straight to my office, where I kept all my important documents. In the second drawer, inside a blue folder, was the deed to Darius's house. The house I had bought for them 5 years ago when they got married. The house where I wasn't welcome for weekend dinners because Tamika needed space to create her own family environment. The house whose last mortgage payment I had made exactly 2 months ago. The house that was still in my name. They had never concerned themselves with that detail. In fact, Darius would always say, "It's just bureaucracy, Mom. We'll handle it later." And I, naive, believed it was just a matter of time before we formalized the transfer. But now I understood. It wasn't oversight. It was convenience. I dried tears I hadn't even noticed falling. I took a deep breath and made a phone call. "Dr. Terrence Brooks, this is Yvonne Carter. Do you remember that house I bought for my son?" "Yes, that one. I need to know what my legal options are." As I spoke with my lawyer, a strange calm began to envelop me. It wasn't anger, though, that was there, pulsing beneath my skin. It was clarity I'd never felt before, as if suddenly all the pieces fit together. Tamika's words about creating healthy boundaries, Darius's growing distance, comments about me being too intense with the grandchildren, excuses for not including me in celebrations, even the fact that in recent Christmases I received increasingly impersonal gifts, an electric cooker, a department store gift card. These weren't isolated incidents. This was a pattern, a plan to slowly push me away while keeping only what benefited them, my financial support, my availability for emergencies, my name on the house documents they couldn't pay for alone. I had been reduced to a function, an emotional and financial ATM. Dr. Brooks confirmed what I already knew. The house was legally mine. I could do whatever I wanted with it, sell, rent, modify. Everything was in my name with no document promising future transfer to Darius. "How long would it take to complete a sale?" I asked, surprising myself with the firmness in my own voice. With an interested buyer, 2 weeks, maybe less if we accelerate the process. The cruise would last 10 days. I opened my laptop and typed an email to Denise, my friend who was a real estate agent. I need to sell a house quickly. It's a matter of dignity. That night, I didn't cry anymore. I made chamomile tea, sat on my balcony, and watched illuminated Atlanta. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Darius, Tamika, or the grandchildren. I was thinking about myself. Who was I before becoming Darius's mother or the grandchildren's grandmother? I remembered the Yvonne who loved to dance, who dreamed of visiting Paris, who had her own friends and interests. The Yvonne who had been gradually erased to make room for a convenient version of myself, one that fit perfectly in the corners of their lives without bothering anyone, without taking up too much space. That message at the port hadn't been just about missing a cruise. It had been a cruel reminder that to them, I was no longer essential. I was expendable, superfluous, not family. Well, if that's how they wanted to play, I had my own cards to play, and it was time to use them. I took my journal and began writing a plan. Not for revenge, though there was a bitter taste of justice in it all. This was for survival. This was for self-respect. While their ship sailed away from the East Coast, I began charting my own course, a course where, for the first time in decades, I was the priority. The week that followed was a whirlwind of calculated actions. Denise, my real estate agent friend, found an interested couple in just 3 days, young, childless, with cash on hand. We scheduled a viewing for the next day. I needed an excuse to get into Darius's house. After all, though it was legally mine, they considered it their home, I used the key I'd always kept. For emergencies, Darius used to say. I entered with the strange feeling of invading a space that belonged to me on paper but not in their hearts. I came to collect some plants to care for while you're away, I told the curious neighbor watching from the garden. She smiled, believing me. After all, I was Darius's devoted mother, known throughout the neighborhood. Inside, I was greeted by silence and memories. I remembered the day I gave them the keys, the emotional embrace Darius gave me, the tears of gratitude in Tamika's eyes, how that had transformed into only family in such a short time. As I walked through the rooms, I noticed the signs of my gradual exclusion. In the photos on the walls, I appeared less and less. In the most recent frames, I wasn't in any of them. On the shelves, none of the books I'd given were displayed. Even the blanket I'd woven for them was stored in a closet, replaced by one from a department store. In Darius's office, I opened the drawers looking for any documents related to the house. That's when I found an envelope with a law firm's letterhead. Inside was a document draft titled Property Transfer, dated 3 months earlier but never signed or presented to me. The text was clear. They planned to ask me to transfer the house to their name as soon as the last payment was made. That was 2 months ago. But something had stopped them. Perhaps they calculated that I wouldn't accept easily, or perhaps they were waiting for the perfect moment to approach me when I was emotionally vulnerable. I put the document in my purse. Evidence. Not that I needed more reason to follow through with my plan, but it confirmed my suspicions. This wasn't an oversight. It was a strategy. The next day, the interested couple visited the house. Camille and Robert, both doctors, fell in love with the property. It's perfect for us, they said, unaware of the drama surrounding these walls. They made an offer above market value with cash payment and closing in 1 week. "Are you sure about this, Yvonne?" asked Denise when we signed the initial documents. "I've never been more sure," I responded, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Dr. Brooks handled all the legal details. He explained that as the registered owner, I had every right to sell the property. They can't claim surprise or ignorance, since the property was always clearly in your name, he clarified. The sale closed in record time. The money was deposited in my account, and the new owners would receive the keys on July 27th. one day before the cruise ship returned. I wrote a letter, simple, direct, final. Darius and Tamika, the house you called home has been sold. Legally, it was always mine, as you well knew. You also knew I finished paying the mortgage 2 months ago using my retirement funds. When I received your message saying I wasn't family enough to join you on the cruise, I finally understood my place in your life. A convenient place, peripheral, available only when needed. The new owners will move in tomorrow. Your personal belongings are stored in a facility paid for 3 months. The key and address are with Dr. Terrence Brooks, whose contact information is attached. Don't bother looking for me. Just as you needed space to grow as a family, I need space to rediscover who I am beyond being a disposable mother and grandmother. Yvonne. I sealed it in an envelope and left it on the kitchen table, where they would certainly see it first. Beside it, I placed a copy of the house deed and the sale contract. On that final night, before handing over the keys to the new owners, I did something I hadn't done in years. I danced. I played Aretha Franklin on my phone and twirled through the empty living room, now without furniture, stripped of false smiles and photographs, clean of unspoken lies. Your family is now homeless, I whispered to the echo of the empty house. That dance wasn't a celebration of revenge. It was a ritual of liberation. For years, I had defined myself by the roles I played in others' lives. Darius's mother, Tamika's mother-in-law, Malik Jr., and Zaria's grandmother, emotional and financial ATM. Always available, never in the way. As I spun in that empty room, I felt the weight of those roles falling away from me. It was as if each turn gave me back a piece of the Yvonne I once was, the one with her own dreams, desires, a life beyond serving others. The next day, I handed the keys to Camille and Robert. They were radiant, talking about plans to redecorate, how they'd transform the extra room into a shared office. "This house has special energy," said Camille. "You can feel there was so much love here." "There was," I replied. "But not all love survives convenience." "Mama, we miss you. The kids ask about you every day. I can't wait to show you the photos." I smiled bitterly at my phone screen. The hypocrisy was so transparent I could almost see it shining through the words. No apology for the exclusion, no acknowledgement of the wound caused, just the continuation of the script where I was supposed to play my part, the understanding mother always ready to forgive. I didn't respond. Each unread notification was a small act of rebellion against decades of unconditional availability. The next day came another message, this time from Tamika. "Yvonne, we brought you wonderful Belgian chocolates. Zaria chose them specially for her grandmother." Again, I left it on read. Silence was my only possible answer at that moment, because if I began speaking, perhaps I wouldn't be able to stop. And I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. When there were 24 hours until they disembarked, Darius called. I let it go to voicemail. "Mama, it's strange that you're not responding. Is everything okay? We're worried. We're arriving tomorrow at 6 p.m. Can we come over for dinner? The kids miss you." The concern in his voice sounded genuine, which made everything even more confusing. How could he exclude me so coldly and then act as if nothing had happened? It was like we lived in parallel realities. On the day of disembarkation, I woke up early and went to a cafe near the port. From a distance, I watched the enormous white ship slowly approach the coast. Somewhere in that floating structure were the people I once called family. I ordered a double espresso and observed the growing movement at the terminal. Families anxious to see their loved ones, app drivers holding name placards, street vendors offering water and refreshments. At 6:15 p.m., I saw Darius, Tamika, and the children coming down the ramp. They were tanned, smiling, loaded with bags. Zaria held a new stuffed animal. Malik Jr. wore a Caribbean island t-shirt. They looked like the perfect image of a happy family. I turned away before they could see me, paid for my coffee, and left. I didn't need to witness the moment they read my letter when they realized the house was no longer theirs. That wouldn't bring me satisfaction. I returned to my apartment and turned off my phone. Whatever happened in the next few hours, I didn't want to witness it. This wasn't about tormenting them or savoring their confusion. It was about finally creating the space I needed to heal decades of small disappointments. That night, I slept restlessly. Part of me still felt guilty, conditioned to put their needs above mine. But another part, growing stronger each day, knew I had done what was necessary. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Darius. He was alone, with deep, dark circles and a pale face. I opened the door without speaking. "How could you?" were his first words, his voice trembling between anger and disbelief. "You sold our house without even consulting us." "It wasn't our house, Darius. It was mine. It always was. It's in the contract you never bothered to read." He ran his hands through his hair, disoriented. "But we lived there. We had a life there. The kids grew up in that house, and I had plans to travel with you, to be part of the family." "It's funny how plans change, isn't it? It was just one trip, son." "No, Mama. It was the last straw. It was the moment I finally understood my place in your life. Convenient when you need me, disposable when I'm in the way." He collapsed on the sofa, suddenly seeming exhausted. "Where are we going to live now? Did you think about the kids?" That question lit something inside me. Decades of sacrifice, putting his needs above mine. And yet, the first concern wasn't about me, my feelings, the pain they caused me. It was about the inconvenience I had created. "You have 3 months of deposits paid, time enough to find another place." And yes, I thought about the kids. I thought about what kind of adults they'll become, seeing how they treat their own mother. Darius looked at me as if I were a stranger. In a way, perhaps I was. The mother he knew, docile, always available, ready to sacrifice everything, had disappeared at that port. "Tamika is devastated," he said, as if that should matter to me. "And how do you think I felt when I read your message that day? Only family, as if I were a distant acquaintance, not the woman who raised you alone." "It was just an unfortunate expression, Mama. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything, Darius, and you know it. It was the perfect summary of what I've been feeling for years, that I'm only welcome when convenient, that my role is to finance dreams, not participate in them." He stood up, pacing nervously through the living room. "What do you want from us?" "An apology." "Okay, I'm sorry. We're both very sorry. It was insensitive. It was wrong. But selling our house? This is disproportionate." "I don't want a forced apology. And it's not about the house. It's about respect. It's about finally understanding my worth." "And how much is that worth?" "The price of a house?" That question hit me like a slap. Suddenly, I saw with crystal clarity what was happening. He wasn't there because he cared about my feelings or had understood his mistake. He was there because he needed a roof. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't a negotiation. The house is sold. The new owners have already moved in. It's irreversible, just like the damage you caused by excluding me from that trip. And what do we do now?" "You? I don't know. I'm going to Paris in 27 days, finally going to live my life, not just exist as a function of yours." Darius looked at me as if I'd delivered a shock. "Paris? For how long?" "I don't know. Maybe a few weeks, maybe months. Maybe I won't come back." He grabbed his phone, his hands trembling. "I need to tell Tamika. She won't believe this. Tell her I finally understood what family means. It's something small, self-contained, that eventually disintegrates." When Darius left, closing the door behind him, I felt an enormous weight being lifted from my shoulders. It wasn't happiness or satisfied revenge. It was simply the relief of finally having spoken truths I'd kept buried for so long. I opened my laptop and checked my airline email. The ticket to Paris glowed on the screen like a promise, not of escape, but of rebirth. At 62 years old, I was about to begin an entirely new chapter. A chapter where I was the protagonist, not just a secondary character in someone else's story. In the days following, messages and calls didn't stop. Darius, Tamika, even mutual friends who were activated to try to bring me to reason. Each phone notification made me take a deep breath, searching for strength to maintain my decision. "Yvonne, you can't just disappear and leave your son and grandchildren on the street," said Marcia, my friend of decades, in a WhatsApp audio. "I know they hurt you, but this is disproportionate." That word haunted me, as if there were an exact measure of reaction for each wound, a perfect equation to calculate how much suffering I deserved, what response was appropriate. "They're not on the street, Marcia," I responded. "They're in a paid storage facility for 3 months. Besides, Darius makes good money. He always said the house was too small for them. Now they have the opportunity to find something that really fits the family." Even as I typed those words, I felt a pang of guilt, not for my actions, but for the bitter person I seemed to be becoming. This wasn't the Yvonne I knew, or perhaps it was, finally freed after decades of repressing her true feelings. On the 10th day after selling the house, I received a bouquet of flowers, white roses, my favorites, with a handwritten card from Tamika. "Yvonne, I understand your pain and sincerely apologize for how we made you feel. We can talk, not for us, but for the children. They miss you." The appeal to the children was predictable. I knew eventually they'd use them as an emotional shield, as a last resort to make me yield. But this time, it wouldn't work, because I missed them painfully too, but I needed to break the cycle I'd created, where my unconditional love was taken for granted and exploited. I put the flowers in a vase, took a photo, and sent it to Tamika with a single word: "Gracias." It wasn't forgiveness or an opening for dialogue. It was a civil acknowledgement of the gesture, nothing more. 2 weeks before my trip, I received an unexpected visit. Zaria, my 7-year-old granddaughter, accompanied by the nanny. "Grandma!" She ran into my arms as soon as I opened the door. "I missed you so much. Why didn't you come visit us at the new house?" My heart clenched. The children, of course, had no part in any of this. They were just pawns in the emotional chess game adults played. "I missed you too, my love," I responded, holding her tight. "I just needed to work through some things." The nanny handed me an envelope. Mrs. Tamika asked me to deliver it personally. Inside was a formal invitation to a dinner at their new house. To start over as a family, the card said in elegant calligraphy. That night, I sat with my journal and weighed my options. Going to the dinner would signal that everything could return to normal, that a formal apology was enough to erase years of small humiliations. Not going would confirm the image they were probably constructing, the bitter, vengeful old woman. I picked up the phone and called Darius. "I received the invitation," I said without preamble. "Good," he sounded genuinely relieved. "So you'll come?" "No, Darius, I won't." Silence on the other end of the line. "Mama, we're trying to fix things. What more do you want from us?" "I don't want anything from you. And that's the point. For years, you wanted me available when convenient and invisible when I wasn't. Now I'm choosing to be unavailable to you and visible to myself." "But what about the kids? They didn't cause any of this." "I agree, and that's why I'll maintain contact with them, but on my terms, not yours." "What terms are those?" His voice had an edge of barely concealed irritation. "I'll take them for a weekend with me once a month without you. Just as you wanted a cruise without me, I want time with my grandchildren without you." "This is ridiculous, Mama. Are you using the kids as leverage?" "No, I'm setting boundaries, something I should have done a long time ago." I hung up before he could respond. My hands trembled, but not from fear or regret. It was the adrenaline of finally confronting the toxic dynamics I'd allowed to develop. The next day, Tamika appeared at my door. She was impeccably dressed as always, but her face betrayed sleepless nights. "Yvonne, can we talk? Just us, woman to woman." I gestured for her to enter. I offered a coffee, she declined, and we sat face to face in the living room. "What happened to you?" she asked, her tone somewhere between concerned and accusatory. "This isn't the Yvonne we know." "You're right, it's not. The Yvonne you knew died at that port when she read her son's message saying she wasn't family enough for a cruise." Tameka lowered her eyes. "It was a terrible mistake. We were stressed with the preparations. I wasn't feeling well with my mother being sick. It was an impulsive decision." Impulsive would be forgetting to tell me about a dinner. Deliberately excluding me from a family trip is a conscious choice, one that reveals exactly what you think about my place in this family. Tameka sighed, adjusting the pearl necklace I'd given her last Christmas. "We were always grateful for everything you did for us, Yvonne. The house, the financial support, the help with the kids." "And that's how you show your gratitude? By treating me like an employee whose services you can dismiss when inconvenient?" "That's not fair to put it that way," she protested, her voice trembling. "We've tried to build our own family, our own identity as a couple. Sometimes that means setting boundaries." "Boundaries," I repeated, tasting the bitter word. "It's funny how those boundaries never applied when you needed money for the kitchen renovation or when you wanted to leave the kids with me for business trips." Tameka blushed slightly. "I know it seems hypocritical." "It doesn't seem that way, Tameka. It is that way." She took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "What can I do to fix this? We're really sorry." I looked at her. Really looked at her, searching for signs of sincerity in her perfectly made-up face. There was something there. Not genuine remorse, perhaps, but certainly an understanding of the consequences. "There's nothing to fix," I responded calmly. "You made your choices. I made mine. Now we live with them. And the kids? We need to find some stability for them. As I told Darius, I'll remain present in their lives, on my terms." "Weekends without us?" Her tone betrayed irritation, as if I weren't trustworthy with my own grandchildren. "It's not about trust, Tameka. It's about building my relationship with them independently of you, just as you built your family independently of me." Tameka stood up, smoothing her skirt in that uncomfortable way she had. "You've changed, Yvonne." "Yes, I changed. I should have changed a long time ago." After she left, I felt strangely light. I hadn't yelled, hadn't cried. I'd simply stated truths that needed stating, without excessive drama or anger. The old Yvonne would have caved, accepting any crumb of reconciliation, starving for approval and inclusion. But this new Yvonne, or perhaps the original Yvonne, smothered by years of self-denial, demanded respect, not just scraps of attention. The following week before my trip, I kept my promise. I picked up Zaria and Malik Jr. for a day with me. We went to the zoo. We bought ice cream. We took silly photos, talked about everything and nothing, their school friends, favorite animals, the book Zaria was reading. Not once did I mention their parents or the situation between us, the adults. They were children. They deserved to be free from the drama of the grown-ups. When I dropped them off, Darius was waiting at the door, tense. "Did they have fun?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Very much," I responded, maintaining the same forced lightness. "They made drawings for you." "Thank you for doing this," he said, sounding genuinely grateful. "Thank you for not pushing them away because of all this." "I would never do that, Darius. I'm not like you." The comment hit as intended, but he simply nodded, accepting the blow. "When are you coming back from Paris?" he asked, changing the subject. "I don't know. Maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe never." "Are you serious?" Real panic was in his voice. "For the first time in decades, I'm putting my needs first. I'll stay as long as necessary to rediscover myself." "And if we need you? What if the kids need you?" I smiled, not with joy, but with the certainty of someone who finally understood their value. They survived 10 days of a cruise without me. I'm sure they'll survive my trip. The night before my flight to Paris, I did something I'd been putting off. I opened the box where I kept all my memories of Darius. Photos from his childhood, school drawings, his first tiny shoe. Each item told the story of unconditional love that had been slowly transformed into convenience. I didn't throw anything away or hide the box at the back of the closet. I simply observed it, recognizing that those memories were part of me, just as the pain of recent exclusion was. I didn't need to deny the past to embrace the future. The next morning, as a taxi took me to the airport, I received a text from Darius. "Te amo, mama." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't believe in their love, but because I'd learned that love without respect is just an empty word, an excuse to continue harmful behavior. The airplane took off on schedule. As the United States fell behind, I felt like I was breathing freely for the first time in years. It wasn't just a geographical journey, it was a voyage into myself, to rediscover the Yvonne who existed before being Darius's mother or the grandchildren's grandmother. The Yvonne with her own dreams, desires, a life that wasn't about serving others. The flight attendant served champagne in first class, a luxury I'd allowed myself with part of the house sale money. I raised my glass in a silent toast, not to the end of a family, but to the beginning of myself. Paris received me with fine rain and gray skies, but nothing could diminish the magic of the moment. Marcia, my sister, was waiting at the airport with a colorful umbrella and an enormous smile. "Welcome to your new life," she said, embracing me tightly. Marcia had always been my opposite. Never married, never had children. She'd built an international career and lived between Paris and Cancun for decades. While I dedicated my life to Darius, she dedicated hers to herself. For years, I'd felt a veiled superiority regarding her choices, as if my maternal sacrifices were somehow more noble than her selfish life, as we used to call it in family conversations. Now at 62, I was beginning to question who had really made the wiser choices. "How do you feel?" Marcia asked as her driver navigated Paris traffic. "Free, scared, guilty, all at the same time." She laughed. "Welcome to real life, sister, where no emotion exists in isolation and every decision has a price." Marcia's apartment was in Le Marais, a historic neighborhood full of galleries, cafes, and designer shops. Her sophisticated lifestyle always seemed extravagant, almost frivolous to me. Now I saw how Marcia had created a life that reflected exactly who she was, without compromises, without unnecessary sacrifices. "I've prepared the guest room, but I think we should find your own space soon," she said, showing me the lovely room with a view of an internal courtyard. "How long are you planning to stay?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I never planned anything beyond selling the house and buying a ticket." "Perfect," smiled Marcia. "The best journeys are those without a defined script." In the days that followed, I immersed myself in Paris like someone thirsting in an oasis. We visited museums, sat in cafes watching people. We walked along the Seine for hours. I absorbed every moment like a sponge, filling a void I hadn't even known existed within me. My phone remained mostly off. I turned it on only once a day, usually at night, to check important messages and make a short video call with Zaria and Malik Jr. The conversations were always light, focused on their daily activities and my Paris discoveries. We never talked about the situation with their parents or when I'd return. A week after arriving, Marcia organized a dinner with some of her friends, artists, writers, university professors, fascinating people living intense, meaningful lives well into their 60s. "This is my sister Yvonne." She introduced me to an elegant, gray-haired woman. She finally discovered there's life beyond being a mother and grandmother. In another moment, I would have been offended by that description. But that night, among laughter and glasses of red wine, I recognized the truth in her words. "What do you do, Yvonne?" asked Philip, a comparative literature professor. "I'm rediscovering who I am," I responded, surprised by my own honesty. "I spent decades being defined by my roles in others' lives. Now I'm writing my own definition." "Ah, A journey of self-discovery, he smiled, the most important of all journeys. That night was revelatory. For the first time in decades, I was seen and appreciated as Yvonne, not as someone's mother, someone's grandmother, someone's mother-in-law, just Yvonne, with opinions, stories, and dreams of her own. The next day, Marcia surprised me with a proposal. I have a friend who rents a small apartment in Montmartre. Nothing luxurious, but full of Parisian charm. Do you want to see it? Rent for myself, but I don't know how long I'll stay. Exactly for that reason. No long-term commitment, just a space of your own while you figure out your next steps. The apartment was a typical Parisian studio, small but perfectly organized, with tall windows letting in the golden autumn light, ancient wooden floors that creaked slightly underfoot, a tiny but functional kitchen. It's perfect, I whispered, feeling that this space symbolized exactly where I was in life, a transitional place, but mine, a beginning. That same afternoon, I signed a 3-month renewable lease. With part of the house sale money, I could afford this transition period without immediate financial concerns. After 2 weeks in Paris, I received an email from Dr. Terrence Brooks. Darius had hired a lawyer and was threatening to challenge the house sale, claiming there was a verbal agreement that the property would eventually be his. "Don't worry," wrote Dr. Brooks. "Without formal documentation, there's nothing they can do legally. The sale was completely legitimate." Still, the news affected me. Not from fear of losing the legal battle. That was non-existent. But from confirmation that Darius still hadn't understood. He continued seeing the situation as an injustice against him, not as a consequence of his own actions. That night, I called him for the first time since my departure. "Why the lawyer, Darius?" "Mama." He sounded genuinely surprised to hear my voice. "Where are you?" "In Paris, as I said I would be." "Why? Did you hire a lawyer?" Silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Because it's not fair. That house was our home. We had an agreement." "What agreement, Darius? The one that existed only in your head, or the one you planned to impose on me after I finished paying the mortgage?" "What are you talking about?" "I found a draft property transfer in your office, dated 3 months ago, never presented to me. You were waiting for the right moment to pressure me, weren't you?" More silence. "It was Tamika's idea," he finally admitted, his voice low. "She thought we should formalize the situation since we'd been living there for years, and you always said the house was for us. And you decided that without consulting me, just like you decided I wasn't family enough for the cruise. Those are completely different situations." "No, Darius, they're exactly the same. In both cases, you made decisions about my life, my feelings, and my property without considering me worthy of participating in the conversation." I heard him breathing deeply, as he had since childhood when trying to control frustration. "Are you going to come back?" "I don't know. I needed to get away, to remember who I am when I'm not defined by the people I love." "The kids ask about you constantly." "I know, and I miss them. But I can't come back to the same dynamic where my love is exploited." "So where does that leave us?" "I don't know yet, but I know I can't return to being the woman I was. That woman is gone." After we hung up, I sat with my journal and wrote, not angry words, but reflections. Slowly, I was beginning to see the situation more clearly, not as a victory or defeat, but as a necessary breaking point. My sister found me on the balcony that evening, watching Paris lights twinkle. "How are you holding up?" she asked, sitting beside me with 2 glasses of wine. "Better than I expected. Guilty, but also free." The guilt is normal. You're doing something that goes against everything you were taught about motherhood and family. But listen carefully, Yvonne. Guilt without growth just perpetuates pain. Your son is an adult with choices. You're responsible for your own happiness, not his. But the children have a mother and father. What they need from you is a grandmother who loves herself, Otherwise, you're just teaching them that martyrdom is love. Her words landed like a stone in still water, creating ripples that spread through everything I believed about family. In the days following, I settled into a routine, painting at a small studio I rented twice a week, walks through Paris neighborhoods, cafes where I sat with a journal and wrote, video calls with the children, always light and happy. My phone remained mostly silent. Early in December, I received a postcard written by hand. It was from Julia. That was Zaria's middle name, though they called her Zaria. She'd drawn a lopsided Eiffel Tower and written, "Grandma, can I come to Paris with you someday? I want to paint with you." I kept it in my journal between the pages where I'd written my first reflections upon arriving. I didn't respond immediately, not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted to do it right, with time, with intention. I knew my story with them wasn't closed, but I also knew it would never be the same. I wouldn't return to being the woman who erased herself for love. If I ever went back, it would be as Yvonne, whole, firm, free. And if I didn't go back, that would be okay too. Because for the first time in my life, I was enough for myself. 3 months later, I renewed my lease on the Montmartre apartment. Marcia had gone to Cancun for the winter, leaving me her keys whenever I needed the Le Marais apartment for my visits to museums and galleries I'd discovered. The divorce papers had arrived in early January. Darius had written me a long letter begging me to reconsider, asking if there was any way to rebuild what we had. I responded with a simple message. I don't want to rebuild what we had. What we had wasn't healthy. What we can have is different. That will take time and effort from both of us. He didn't respond, but small changes began to appear. He paid for a month of therapy, his first ever. He called the children once a week instead of me always reaching out. He started asking them about their lives instead of immediately asking them to ask me when I was coming home. Zaria came to Paris in March for 2 weeks of spring break. She was ecstatic, painting alongside me in my small studio, laughing at my mistakes, teaching me things about color and composition that children understand better than adults. When her mother picked her up, Zaria cried, but not with the guilt I used to feel, just the natural sadness of parting. "Thank you for showing her this," Tameka said awkwardly at the airport. "She's my granddaughter," I replied. "That's what grandmothers do." "And you, will you come back to Atlanta?" "I don't know yet. Maybe for visits. But this is my home now." It wasn't a cold statement, it was simply true. The money from the house sale allowed me to stay longer than I'd planned. I traveled to Brussels, Amsterdam, Barcelona. I took a painting class with serious artists, not just hobbyists. I made friends my own age who had their own lives and dreams. And slowly, almost without noticing, Yvonne became fully herself again. Not the bitter, angry version that had emerged in those first weeks, but not the self-erasing version from before either. A balanced woman who loved her family but didn't disappear into that love, who set boundaries not out of punishment but out of self-respect. Darius called on my birthday. We talked for an hour. He asked about my life in Paris, my paintings, my friends. He told me about the kids' school year, his work challenges, small things. It was awkward at times, but it was real. "I'm sorry, Mama," he said before, hanging up, "for all of it." "I know," I replied, "and I forgive you. But more importantly, I've forgiven myself." That summer, I went back to Atlanta for 2 weeks. Darius and Tameka had found a modest apartment. The kids were thriving. During my visit, I took them to the zoo, cooked my famous gumbo in their tiny kitchen, attended Malik Jr.'s baseball game, and on my last night, I had coffee with Darius alone on their balcony. "Do you think you'll ever move back?" he asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I might visit more often, and maybe you could bring the kids to Paris next summer." He nodded, accepting. "I'm proud of you, you know, for what you did, for choosing yourself." I'm proud of me too, I said, and meant it. When I left Atlanta to return to Paris, my suitcase was full of paintings Zaria and Malik Jr. had made for me. In my carry-on, I had Tamika's recent photo, a real attempt at connection, and a letter from Darius about his therapy progress. The plane rose above the city that had been my home for 62 years, but where I'd rarely been myself. As clouds covered the ground below, I thought about the woman who'd stood at that cruise port feeling worthless, and the woman now returning to Paris knowing her value. Sometimes love requires distance, sometimes healing requires boundaries, and sometimes the most important journey is the one we take back to ourselves. Paris was raining when I landed. Marcia was there with her umbrella and her smile. "Welcome home," she said, and I hugged her, tears streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from finally, completely understanding what that meant, to be home in myself.